prophet is not welcome in his hometown and sometimes not on radio. I told y'all that with Donald Trump refusing to debate in the Republican primaries, Joe Biden would use that in the general election. And guess what? It's becoming clear that Joe Biden has no intention of debating Donald Trump. Joe Biden was confronted by reporters last night on Donald Trump's offer to debate him. And he said, quote, "If I were him, I would want to debate me too. He's got nothing else to do." This has been Biden's plan the whole time. Biden does not want to do a presidential debate. In fact, Joe Biden is sitting out the Super Bowl interview. Now, you and I can be thankful that Joe Biden is not willing to do the Super Bowl interview because it just politicizes a big sporting event where Americans tend to find common ground, unless you're a Taylor Swift conspiracy theorist. Joe Biden's not going to do it because it's an unscripted interview. He doesn't want to make a mistake. This is from a year ago, February 16th, 2023, Jonathan Martin. High-level Democrats are rallying to President Biden's reelection, not because they think it's in the best interest of the country to have an 82-year-old start a second term, but because they fear the potential alternative, the nomination of Kamala Harris and an election of Donald Trump. Not that many of them will say it publicly, at least not directly. Quote, "Nobody wants to be the one to do something that would undermine the chances of a Democratic victory in 2024, Representative Dean Phillips explained to me." Ironically, Phillips being one of those who's decided to run for president to challenge Joe Biden. Behind the scenes, though, other Democrats agree. There was the senator who said few Democrats in the chamber want Biden to run again, but the party has to devise an alignment of interest with the president to get him off the narcotic of the office. There's the governor who mused about just how little campaigning Biden would be able to do. There was the House member who, after saying that, of course, Democrats should renominate the president, told me to turn off my phone, then demanded to know who else was out there and said Harris wasn't an option. And now there's this, a year later, from yesterday, also from Politico. Over the past week, Joe Biden conducted a retaliatory strike against Iranian militants, stomped his way to a victory in the South Carolina Democratic primary, and saw a massive beat of expectations on a monthly jobs report. It was consequential several days, made all the more striking by the fact that Biden wasn't physically around for much of it. The president has kept a distance from the action, not addressing the nation on the strikes, not staying in South Carolina for his win, and declining to participate in the semi-traditional Super Bowl interview this coming Sunday. The low-key approach is one the White House has adopted before, at times worrying some in his party who say it's critical that he sees any opportunity to counter criticism that he's too old or disengaged for the job. The administration insists it is by design, and that the concerns miss not just how much he interacts with the public, but the nuances of the job. That's especially true, they note, with respect to the airstrikes launched in response to the death of 3 Americans. Senior officials worry an Oval Office-style speech would signal the U.S. is at war. Really? Sure. Y'all, the president is going into hiding. But I'll tell you, the thinking from Republicans and Democrats alike, it's not just the Democrats, it's the Republicans too. They say it's helped Donald Trump. That Donald Trump being tied up in court, this is the conventional wisdom is rapidly reaching this point that Donald Trump, by being tied up in court and not regularly on the campaign trail, that's why he's gotten ahead of Biden in the polls, because people forget him. And that Biden is overexposed and he's out there so much and he makes missteps, he makes forwards. Oh, he has a speech impediment and a stutter. They want people to forget the incompetencies and mental decline of the President of the United States, who is not in his right headspace. President Biden told a crowd in Las Vegas on Sunday he recently met with François Mitterrand, the French president who's been dead for nearly 30 years. Apparently, Nancy Reagan's psychic and seance guru is back in the White House. The comments came while Biden was warning of the dangers of a potential second Trump presidency as he aimed to shore up enthusiasm ahead of the Democratic primary in Nevada. Biden recounted a story he told many times during his presidency about a meeting he had with French President Emmanuel Macron during a G7 meeting in England some months after Biden took office. I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from France, looked at me and said, well, how long you back for? Francois Mitterrand was the president of France from 81 to 95. He died in 1996. Joe Biden, instead of talking about Macron, says Mitterrand. He's getting people confused. Now listen, everybody does this. When you have kids, you do this particularly. My wife and I will sometimes call the kids the dog's name and call the dog the kid's names. And sometimes we've got oldest daughter is 18, our son is 15, and we'll start to call them by each other's names, even though they're one's boy, one's girl. It's parents do it. It's dad brain, it's mom brain. It's also old person brain. Older people do this sort of thing, but older people tend to slow down and not decide to run for re-election as president of the United States when they're in their 80s. And there is a problem for Joe Biden. We talked about the NBC News poll yesterday on the program that has Donald Trump beating Joe Biden and has Joe Biden beating Donald Trump if Donald Trump is convicted of crimes, but so barely that the pollsters say we can't really believe this is true. If Trump is convicted of a crime, some of these people may actually still vote for him, but they're telling us they won't. We don't know that we believe them. In an era of massively divided government, in an era of massively divided populations within this country who are divided on every issue, Republicans like what Democrats hate. Democrats like what Republicans hate. Nobody agrees on anything in this country anymore. In a nation more divided than at any time in its history since the Civil War, Americans across all parties have agreed on one thing and one thing only. They all hate Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris's approval in this country, serial killers and syphilis are more popular across party lines. Democrats, Republicans, independents, moderates, progressives, conservatives. Americans are united against Kamala Harris. There is no group, no demographic, including racial demographic and gender demographic, where Kamala Harris gets majority approval rating. That's how unpopular Kamala Harris is. Black women don't like her. White women don't like her. Black men don't like her. White men don't like her. Hispanic men and women don't like her. Old people don't like her. Young people don't like her. Democrats don't like her. Progressives don't like her. Republicans don't like her. Independents don't like her. Nobody likes her. And so when people go vote for Joe Biden for a second term, they're voting for the woman none of them like because he's not going to live. It's a high-pressure job. He's already had a brain aneurysm in the past. The man is not fit. People can see his decline. They're saving him. They're keeping him off the spotlight, off the stage. They don't want him to do interviews. They don't want him to go off the cuff. They know he rambles. They know he says crazy things. And so people are thinking Kamala's going to be the president and go, oh my God, I don't like her. At this point, about the only thing Donald Trump needs to do to win a second term is to pick someone that Americans can look at and say, well, thank God that person's not Kamala Harris. I need to ask you a question. A serious question here. Democrats tell us that Donald Trump is a real threat to the American Republic and our democratic system. If that's so, why aren't Democrats acting like it's so? If Democrats really believe that Donald Trump is a threat to the American Republic, Why are they keeping Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, a man who's losing in almost every poll to Donald Trump, so much so that he's refusing already to debate Donald Trump and won't even do an interview before the Super Bowl lest he put his foot in his mouth? Why are Democrats propping up Kamala Harris as the vice president and vice presidential nominee when she's the most unpopular politician in America? She makes serial killers and syphilis look downright popular compared to how badly she polls. If Donald Trump is genuinely, truly a threat to the American Republic, why are Democrats operating as if they don't believe it and they don't care? Maybe Donald Trump isn't the threat they claim he is. Because if Donald Trump were truly the threat the Democrats claim he was, they wouldn't be nominating Joe Biden and they wouldn't be sending Kamala Harris back to be the vice presidential nominee. Joe Biden has gone into hiding. He had great economic news last week. He had foreign policy challenges and successes allegedly last week, although they weren't really that big a success. He's not spending time with the press. He's not on stage. He's not doing press conferences except ones that are highly guarded, highly restricted with questions screened in advance. They know he's in mental decline. They're trying to keep him out of the spotlight because of his mental decline. It's going to be very hard to do that with Donald Trump on the campaign trail. Donald Trump of today is not the Donald Trump of 2016. The problem for the Democrats is that the Joe Biden of today is not the Joe Biden of 2016. He's not even the Joe Biden of 2020. And while Trump undoubtedly at his age has also suffered some level of mental and physical decline because of his age, he's still way sharper than Joe Biden, and he can still speak off the cuff. Democrats want to point out that Donald Trump confused Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley. Okay, that's fine. But at least they're still both alive. President Biden confused the living president of France with the dead president of France from 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. People see it. The Democrats are trying to highlight now all the goofy things Donald Trump says. Donald Trump, though, speaks off the cuff without a teleprompter. Joe Biden speaks off a teleprompter and still screws it up. And Donald Trump hasn't chosen his vice presidential nominee yet. Joe Biden is sticking with his deeply unpopular one. The Democrats, for all of their belly aching and screaming that Donald Trump is a threat to the Republic, they're not acting like he actually is. And they've sent Joe Biden back to the witness protection program, and that's not a way to campaign for re-election for President of the United States in the social media, always-on 21st century. And I suspect a lot of them know it. And if he loses in November, there will be hell to pay on the Democratic side. It will be glorious to watch.